Let us begin. So starting with sensing, with feeling this chant that we were just listening to from the last couple of minutes. As we would know, this is the Maha Mrityunjay Jap, in which, there would be several ways to understand this. And yet one of the ways is that we are praying to the gods that may I not leave the body till I have accomplished what I was here to do, what I had come here to accomplish. So may I be ripe fully, because when a fruit is ripe, it lets itself go. But if it's not ripe, you have to pull it out. So when and while I'm praying for ripeness and to do the things that would make me ripe, may I aspire for the right things, because just asking for a long life won't get us anywhere except would give us few more years. But what am I doing in my life is what truly matters. So invoking Mother and Sri Aurobindo's grace and presence as we begin this session. So we are taking up Looking from Within, the book by Dr. A.S. Dalal. And I would like to start with just a few lines from Savitri. They are really beautiful. The lines are, "My soul and his indissolubly linked in the task for which our lives were born, to raise the world to God in deathless light, to bring God down to the world on earth we came, to change the earthly life to life divine." So last time we had started on difficulties of the character. We had finished the last session and there were some passages from Sri Aurobindo which were really beautiful. And if you haven't attended, you can go through the recording of the book. They were very nice. And then we were on this passage from the Mother again. Extremely beautiful. We had to take up the last paragraph. But let's just read the whole passage again. That would be a good overlap and we'll discuss the last part. So it's a long one. In case anybody has the capacity, they can please read. Otherwise, I'll go.
Yeah, and start. Even the most beautiful theories, even if one knows mentally many things and holds admirable principles, that is not sufficiently strong to create a will capable of resisting an impulse. At one time, you are quite determined, you have decided that it would be thus. For example, that you would not do such a thing. It is settled. You will not do it. But how is it that suddenly you do not know how or why, nor what has happened? You have not decided anything at all. And then you immediately find in yourself an excellent reason for doing the thing. Among others, there is a certain kind of excuse which is always given. Well, if I do it this time, at least I shall be convinced that it is very bad, and I shall do it no longer, and this will be the last time. It is the prettiest excuse one always gives to oneself. This is the last time I'm doing it. This time I'm doing it to understand perfectly that it is bad and that it must not be done, and I shall not do it at any more. This is the last time. Every time it is the last time, and you begin again. Of course, there are some who have less clear ideas and who say to themselves, after all, why don't I want to do it? These are theories. They are principles that might not be true. If I have this impulse, what is it that tells me that this impulse is not better than a theory? It is not for them the last time. It is something they accept as quite natural. Between these two extremes, there are all possibilities. But the most dangerous of all is to say, well, I'm doing it once more this time. That will purify me of this. Afterwards, I shall no longer do it. Now the purification is never enough. It happens only when you have decided. Well, this time I'm going to try not to do it, and I shall not do it. I shall apply all my strength and I shall not do it. Even if you have just a little success, it is much. Not a big success, not just a small success, a very partial success. You do not carry out what you yearn to do, but the yearning, the desire, the passion is still there, and that produces worlds within. But outside you resist. I shall not do it. I shall not move. Even if I have to bind myself hand and foot, I shall not do it. It is a partial success, but it is a great victory because due to this, next time you will be able to do a little more. That is to say, instead of holding all the violent passions within yourself, you can begin calming them a little, and you will calm them slowly at first with difficulty. They will remain long, they will come back, they will trouble you, vex you, produce in you a great disgust. All that. But if you resist well and say, no, I shall carry out nothing, whatever the cost. I shall not carry out anything. I will stay like a rock. Then, little by little, that thins out, and you begin to learn the second attitude. Now, I want my consciousness to be above those things. There will still be many battles, but if my consciousness stands above that, little by little, there will come a time when this will return no longer. And then there is a time when you feel that you are absolutely free. You do not even perceive it. And then that is all. It may take a long time. It may come soon. That depends on the strength of character, on the sincerity of the aspiration. But even for people who have just a little sincerity, if they subject themselves to this process, they succeed. It takes time. They succeed in the first item, in not expressing. All forces upon earth tend towards expressing themselves. These forces come with the object of manifesting themselves, and if you place a barrier and refuse expression, they may try to beat against the barrier for a time, but in the end, they will tire themselves out and not being manifested, They will withdraw and leave you quiet. So you must never say,
Yeah,
I shall
so
first.
maybe we can just pause because this is from the old one. Thank you. It was a very long read, but very beautiful. Any reflections on this? Any questions before we move to the last paragraph that we were yet to cover properly? It's pretty self-explanatory. Mother is telling us how does one get over things that one is stuck with, that one wants to get over. So she is so clearly telling us how does our brain, our mind, our being, parts of our being manipulate us in continuing to do the lower movement, and how we can stop from falling down that slide and go down every single time. What's the way? So this is the recap that one has to stop rather than saying one more time. It has to be now this time I'll try not to do it. And from there, the shift starts happening. It might take time. And she says it depends on the strength of character, like how strongly you can stop yourself, control your impulses, and on the sincerity of your aspiration, because with your aspiration comes the grace. So these are the two things that would decide the time, but we must begin. And yeah, so that's what we have read. So, and of course, at any time, if there's any question, reflection, please unmute without hesitation and share. And now we'll take up this passage that we were yet to cover properly. And since Ritu has read a lot, I'll just read this unless Dia wants to, and we'll take it up.
Okay, do you want me to read this? I
Uh,
can go ahead.
okay, so just this last.
Okay. So you must never say, I shall first purify my thought, purify my body, purify my vital, and then later I shall purify my action. That is the normal order, but it never succeeds. The effective order is to begin from outside. The very first thing is that I do not do it, and afterwards I declare it no longer, and next I close my doors completely to all the impulses. They no longer exist for me. I am now outside all that. This is true order. The order that is effective, first not to do it, and then you will no longer desire, and after that it will go out of your consciousness completely.
Thank you, Dia. Again, this part is also there in the sunlit part, just this section where mother says that how the brain usually works, but how if we go in that order, it would not help us and what we need to do. So we usually say that the craving, the desire, the impulse needs to stop and then I will stop. That too also might happen, but don't know how many eons that would take. So mother says, she warns us. She says, you must never say, I shall first purify my thought, purify my body, purify my vital, and then later I shall purify my action. She said that order of things would never probably happen. And this is just again another trick so that I can continue the way I have been living. So, this is the normal order, she says, but it never succeeds. And now she says the effective order is to begin from the outside. The very first thing is that I do not do it. So, I stop doing it physically, the action, and afterwards I desire it no longer. So, waiting for the desire to subside, she said, would never happen. But if I stop doing it, then the desire would subside. So, first stopping the action, then I desire it no longer. I will see that for myself. And next, I close my doors completely to all impulses. They no longer exist for me. I'm now outside all that. This is the true order, the order that is effective. First, not to do it, and then you will no longer desire, and after that, it will go out of your consciousness completely. Like you won't even remember that that was ever an agenda, that was ever an impulse, that was ever an addiction. And if somebody would ask you, hey, do you still do that? And you would be like, no. And that's like, you have to go back and remember, oh, yes, I used to do that. So it's beautiful how things unfold. So the first step is to stop doing the action or actions which we feel are not serving us, are not there in good light. So this beautiful long passage was from the mother. And take now moving on for today's new passage. So if anybody would like to read, they can read and we'll then take it up with the passage again by the mother, from the mother.
Mother, there are mistakes. One knows there are mistakes, but still, it is as though one were pushed into making them. Then, pushed by what? Ah, this is exactly what happens. It is the lower nature, the instincts of the subconscious which govern you and make you do things you should not do. And so it is a choice between your will and accepting submission. There is always a moment when one can decide. It goes to the point where there is even a moment when one can decide to be ill or not to be ill. It even goes so far that a moment comes when one can decide to die or not to die. But for that, one must have an extremely awakened consciousness because this speck is infinitesimal in time and like the hundredth part of a second. And because before it one can do nothing, and after if one can do nothing, but at that moment one can. And if one is absolutely awake, one can, at that moment, take the decision. But for ordinary things, as for example, giving way before an impulse or refusing it, it is not a space, not even the space of a second. One has plenty of time before him. One certainly has several minutes. And it is a choice between weak submission and control and a controlling will. And if the will is clear, if it is based on truth, if truly it obeys the truth and is clear, it will it always has the power to refuse the wrong movement. It is an excuse you give yourself when you say, I could not. It is not true. It is that truly you have not wanted it the right way. For there is always the choice between saying yes and saying no. But one chooses to be weak and later gives oneself this excuse, saying, it is not my fault. It was stronger than I. It is your fault if the thing was stronger than you, because you are not these impulses. You are a conscious soul and an intelligent will. And your duty is to see that this is what governs you and not the impulses from below, the mother.
Mhm. So just taking it up with little more details, although it's from the mother, very simple, we can all understand. So here, according to me, mother is again, helping us see the way we avoid changes. I mean, a part of us want to change, a part of us wants to progress, wants peace, simplicity, love, clarity, harmony. And yet we know there lives in us other parts which fall, which, cannot allow that harmony. And mother is telling us, how does that happen? How do I choose this harmony over harmony when all I would want is harmony? So when somebody is asking mother that it feels as if I'm pushed into making mistakes, mother is asking, because it's more about facts, right? Pushed by what? Like who is pushing us? What is pushing us? And then, of course, she knows how we fall. So she says this is exactly what happens. It is the lower nature, the instincts of the subconscious which govern you and make you do things you should not do. So it's not that, I mean, there's a part of you still who would want to do it, but those are the things you should not be doing. And it is the lower nature that makes us do that. So, it feels a very natural thing. It feels, why do I need to even stop this? Even knowing the consequences that I have often faced going down that lane, still at the moment of decision, my being often questions, why not? Let me just do it. What's the wrong? What's wrong? It's natural. But that is lower nature. If we can identify, we can have a better discussion with us inside. So so that's the lower nature which governs us and makes us do things we should not do. And so it is a choice between your will and accepting submission. So either I am choosing my will to not fall down, my will to not choose disharmony over harmony, not to choose gossip over silence, or accepting submission, the submission to my impulses, the pressure of outside of what I am expected to say and how I am expected to behave, and my own images that often escape me that I'm doing this and not doing this because of this and that. So the submission is to outside forces and inside forces, and this is a choice. So Mother says, there is always a moment when one can decide. Now there is this quote, um, about, we really want to react, right? We feel there is no choice. And there is this quote, I mean, it's on prayer that if you're too busy to take out 5 minutes for your prayers, then you need to take out 2 hours, something like this. I'm not saying it right, but that is the importance of that. And that this also reminds me that in one of the videos, hi, Thich Nhat Hanh, he says that every time, that his monastery is called Plum Village. So he says that every time the phone rings in the village, all of us, we straighten up and we just do those, 3 seconds of breathing in, and we take 3 long deep breaths. And then we start and somebody answers the phone. So that's a process they have set for themselves. So that teaches the being, because something in us believes I have to answer, I have to reply. I just, kind of, it's not responding, it's reacting back to back. Like as if it's a game of, say tennis or pickleball or whatever, that there's no chance that I can miss this ball, but I can and I must. And this also, like yesterday's, I'm sorry, not yesterday. the circle of harmony this week, where we heard that talk, where it was shared that stop cherishing your opinions, I feel would also fall under that category. We cherish our opinions ourselves too much. So the quote was, don't seek the truth, just stop cherishing your opinions. Yeah. So it is a choice between your will and accepting submission. There is always a moment when one can decide. It goes to the point where there is even a moment. So, Mother is just telling us our powers, right? What every human being, including myself, is capable of. It's just a choices I'm making. I'm choosing not to know. I'm choosing not to have this strength, to develop this strength. Today, if I have to say, write a passage of 500 words, I would not say that, what are you talking, 500 words? Let's make it 200. It would be like, I cannot be shocked that they are expecting me to do that. And yet, if a 2-year child, if a 5-year-old child is expected to write a passage of 500 words, he might look at you that, are you crazy? I can't do that. But once we decide, once we practice with age, with maturity, with practice, it's very easy. So everything that I'm capable of doing, that the masters are telling us we can do, and yet it appears funny to us or weird to us or impossible to us, it just shows I'm choosing not to hone that part of me. So to just make her point more strong, to tell us our capacities, she doesn't need to make her point strong. So she says, there is even a moment when one can decide to be ill or not to be ill. So here, if I'm talking about how do I stop an impulse for making myself a puppet, Mother says, you have so much capacity, so much capability. It even goes so far that a moment comes when one can decide to die or not die. So, this is my capability. I can choose. So many sadhaks, who were living in the ashram, even in their accounts, they have mentioned that Mother always used to say that keep fighting, just say no when it comes. So, that again, that's building that muscle. But for that, one must have an extremely awakened consciousness, because this speck is infinitesimal in time and like the 100th part of a second. Like, it's like you just have this fraction of a second with you in which you can make that choice. If you're busy in your thoughts or reactions or actions or emotions or stories, you won't realize when it comes. So, if one has practiced to be extremely awakened at all moments, that one will see that it is a question that is asked, that are you ready? And you can say no. So, and because before it, one can do nothing, and after it, one can do nothing. So, you can do nothing before you are asked that question. That's just that fraction of a second which you have to decide. Before that and after that, you don't have any control. But at that moment, one can. And if one is absolutely awake, one can at that moment take the decision. So just reminding ourselves that this is Mother who's sharing. It's not a hyperbole. It's not exaggeration. It is our truth. It is our capacity. Pausing here at this one paragraph in case there's any reflection before taking up the next.
This sounds so unbelievable. No? I mean, it even goes so far that a moment comes when one can decide to die or not to die. So it's Seems to be very unbelievable, but I'm sure it's true.
Yes.
And people who have NDEs would be extremely, must be having an extremely awakened consciousness where they can choose where they want to go.
I think that would not be applicable here because there it was not, that's not a decision. That's a decision that's made for you. You've already left from your side. You don't see it coming. So if you read accounts and all of people with NDEs, they've already left and then things are happening and then they're asked that here or there or they're told your time is not, it's not your time yet.
But
She talked.
even then, with some people,
Hmm.
they do get an option to decide, even if
Yeah,
they've
so it's
left.
a very clear option. It's like, okay, I am asking, hey Ritu, would you like a cup of coffee? And you can choose there. So it's not that you need to be very awakened for that. Are you getting the difference? That crossing has already happened. You have already, a part
Huh.
of your being has already left. So what mother is talking about is before you leave, you
Yeah.
have the choice.
But see, even after you leave, if somebody has that choice, not everybody has that choice. One in a million would be having that choice. So that's something I think also a little bit about your consciousness. That's what I am
Yeah,
thinking might
yeah,
be, you know. And, you know, even in that movie Game of Thrones, no, that series Game of Thrones, that if you remember, that young girl, the guy who teaches him how to fight, tells her that even if death comes, you tell it it's not your day.
yeah. Not today, not today. Arya
Yeah, yeah.
Star. Yeah. We don't
Hmm.
die today. Yeah. So this is exactly the same spirit, that spirit of a fighter. And you have given an extremely good example for those of us who have watched that series, that you have a choice. So even if death comes today, even like he said that if there's no chance that you will be alive today, because there's this war, there is this fight, there are these armies which are in front of you, still you say not today and you fight as if it cannot be today. And obviously what happens, happens. Yeah. So, taking the next paragraph, mother says, but for ordinary things, as for example, giving way before an impulse or refusing it, it is not a space, not even the space of a second. One has plenty of time before him, one certainly has several minutes, and it is a choice between weak submission and a controlling will. So what when we have fractions of second, that is for really big events, right? Death, maybe a second for illness. But these impulses that control us, that make us our slaves, for that we have a lot of time. If somebody is shouting at us, we have that thing that do I need to shout back? Do I have to respond? And mostly we choose to respond because the will is overtaken by the submission of the impulses के मुझे कैसे बोल दिया ऐसे कैसे बोल दिया. So many things, for each his own, the reasoning and the situations, and yet we all have situations where we feel helpless or we feel, oh my God, I want to stop. Why don't I? So, remembering that it is always a choice between weak submission and a controlling will. It is really difficult, and yet, when we start doing it, it becomes easy very fast. But we have to be persistent and consistent in that controlling will. And as in the old last paragraph, where mother was saying that once we decide not to do it, it's as if all the forces in the universe, they come and they try to break that. I feel that is also very important because sometimes we feel कि ये हो क्या रहा है. So just to be aware of that, I feel is very good. I'll just see where it was. Yeah, so these forces come with the object of manifesting themselves, and if you place a barrier and refuse expression, they may try to beat against the barrier for a time. Like you've closed the door, somebody wants to come in, you don't want them in your house. So it's not that they just leave that, oh, the door is shut, let me go back. It's not polite. They will beat against that barrier for that time, but in the end, they will tire themselves out and not being manifested, they will withdraw and leave you quiet. So we know where we fall, we know how we fall. Maybe this can help us to the next time when we are falling to see how we are falling so that we can stop falling or decrease the intensity of a fall slowly and move towards that. Mother says, and if the will is clear, if it is based on truth, if truly it obeys the truth and is clear, it always has the power to refuse the wrong movement. So, if the will, my will is clear, if it is based on truth, a lot of time my will could also be based on my ego, right? This is who I want to be. This is who I would pretend to be. This is the image that I like. Then it doesn't stick too much. But if the will is clear, if it's based on truth, if truly it obeys the truth and is clear, it always, I feel that, there are some words that we have started taking up for granted. But at least when we read such passages, when we read the teachings, and the directions from the masters and the mystics, we must never miss these words. There's no exception, always has no exception. Mother didn't say mostly. Mother says it always has the power to refuse the wrong movement. So if I'm having issues with any wrong movement, so two main things, either I don't want to do it strongly enough or it is not based on truth. My will, my aspiration is not based on truth so that I can look and see where am I going wrong. So it is an excuse you give yourself when you say, I could not. So I could not, it is not true. It is that truly you have not wanted it in the right way. For there is always the choice between saying yes and saying no. But one chooses to be weak and later gives oneself this excuse saying, it is not my fault, it was stronger than I. I think this section was also in the sunlit path. It's sounding very familiar. One chooses to be weak and later gives oneself this excuse saying, it is not my fault, it was stronger than I. It is your fault, Mother says, if the thing was stronger than you. Because you are not these impulses. You are a conscious soul and an intelligent will. And your duty is to see that this is what governs you and not the impulses from below. We must make sure we understand at least mentally what Mother is saying here, especially because in our times we use the word naturally a lot, and I am just repeating myself. The first time I had met Acharya Prashant, those times he used to have those one-to-ones which were easy and very affordable. I think I used the word naturally twice in a conversation, and he stopped me. He was like, what is naturally? You're not, you're above the nature. You cannot just have nature control you and say this, just, like everything, so khoon maaf. because naturally this is the impulse you're feeling, or it's a natural thing to do. He said, no, that's just your habit. And if it's natural, you can override it because you are not nature. You are the boss of nature. You're above nature. You are the soul. The soul is above nature. So there's always a choice between saying yes and saying no. If we can, hammer this in our brain, it would be really good. It would serve us really well. There is always the choice between saying yes and saying no, but one chooses to be weak. So at least if I'm doing it, now I can know how I do it and what is my truth and what is my dishonesty. That if you're choosing to be weak and then later you give this excuse, it was not my fault, it is not my fault, it was stronger than I. So mother very clearly, our loving, polite, sweet mother says, no, it is your fault. It's a fact, it is your fault. If the thing was stronger than you, no excuses. It cannot be true because you are not these impulses. You are a conscious soul and an intelligent will. If these impulses were really strong, they would not subside, they would not go away. Something happens, someone does something, and I'm like, this person is just too bad. I just can't stand him. And in 2 hours or 2 days or 2 weeks, I forget that mostly. Where does the anger go? Where does that stand goes? It's transitory. The impulses don't have life in themselves. We give them lives. So knowing that I am not my impulse, I am a conscious soul and an intelligent will. Even if we cannot live these words, I think if we just even say these words to ourselves, that I am not my impulses, I am a conscious soul and an intelligent will, and it is my duty to see that this is what governs me and not the impulses from below. I think Ritu, you had also shared something from the mystic Akhand Anandji, right? On the same lines where he is telling us to
Yeah,
remind
yeah.
ourselves. Yeah, would you like to repeat that if you remember? It's very, again, the right space for that.
So, Khandananji says this very beautifully that every day in the morning when you start your practice, you just tell yourself, it's in Hindi, I've written it and I remember it, so I'll just write out. अपने प्रत्यक्ष चैतन्य अभिन्न ब्रह्म स्वरूप में बैठकर कहिए, मुझ में माया नहीं है, प्रकृति नहीं है, त्रिगुण नहीं है, महत्व नहीं है, अहंकार नहीं है, पंच महाभूत नहीं है। मैं अद्वितीय परम ब्रह्म परमात्मा हूँ। ये निश्चय करके ध्यान में बैठे। अपने स्वरूप का ध्यान होने से दूसरा रहेगा ही नहीं। जब दूसरा रहेगा ही नहीं, तो किस में मन को लगाएंगे और किससे हटाएंगे?
Would you like to translate that for us?
मन
Huh?
तो अपने प्रत्यक्ष चैतन्य भिन्न ब्रह्म स्वरूप में बैठकर, it's so difficult to translate. Pratyaksh means something which is in front of you,
Which
not
is
paroksh.
clear, absolutely clear, right? Like you can see it.
Yeah. Chaitanya Abhin. That means it is conscious. It is not anything which is away from consciousness. Brahma Swarup. Brahm means that
And
you are,
Abhin word is not differentiated, not divided, right? Not separated. So whole,
yeah.
unity. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Brahma Swarup. That means your real self, your soul, your
Yeah,
divinity.
divine consciousness, your true
Mhm.
origin. Yeah.
So sit in that प्रत्यक्ष चैतन्य भिन्न ब्रह्म स्वरूप and then tell yourself कि मुझ में माया नहीं है. Maya would mean anything that's illusionary, Prakriti nahi hai. Prakriti would mean something that's changing,
Nature.
that's temperamental.
Nature,
Yeah,
yeah.
Nature, yeah.
yeah. Trigun nahi hai. There are three parts of Trigun: Satgun, Rajogun, Tamogun. So somebody who's beyond all these three guns.
Yeah, I think those are the virtues.
Yeah. Mahatva nahi hai. That means I'm not inclined towards anything, this or that. अहंकार नहीं है. That means अपने होने का. That means अस्मिता. That means that
Ego.
ego of me being in existence, of me doing things. और पंच महाभूत नहीं है. Taru and Diya. So
Yeah.
Panch Mahabhut would be?
I think it is all the 5 elements that we are made of
Yeah.
air, water, etc. So
Yeah, so
I think
that's
this
what we
basically,
and beyond them. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lydia, please.
मैं
So I think this basically tells us to remind us of our core nature, keeping all these aside, what we are always think we are.
yeah, this body, maybe the 5 elements of this body.
Yeah.
मैं अद्वितीय मतलब that is not divided. That
Non-dual.
is dualistic. Yeah.
You got muted, Ritu.
United to the divine.
Yeah. So you sit with that that thought that this is what I am.
Aditya
And
के
then when
बाद
you
what word is there? You got muted.
परम ब्रह्म परमात्मा हूँ.
Any illusion.
So basically it's
No.
like
The last part is not illusion. Param Brahm Paramatma. That's
not
not that.
Brahm,
Huh.
it's Brahm, Brahm.
Okay, Param Brahma.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
the
It's very
divine.
confusing. Brahm and Brahm is very confusing. Yeah. So once one sits with this thought and with this realization and with this belief, then it will be so much easier to sit and concentrate and do your practice. Then you will not have wandering thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ritu, for translating.
No, thank you. Your
This
Hindi is
reminds
very good.
me.
You were able to translate so much better than me.
Yeah, no, this entire thing is actually very well defined. This reminds me of a Isha Kriya, which was something, one of the exercises of Sadhguru, that I am neither my mind nor my body. So I'm something above that. It is a lot similar to that saying as well.
Yeah.
Yes, and actually, when one says it, one also starts feeling it. Although, if one reads it, it doesn't really get into, I mean, gets absorbed. But when one closes one's eyes and then says it out aloud, after a couple of
Yeah.
seconds, it starts penetrating.
Yeah, I feel very liberated when I actually pronounce those words, that I'm neither my mind nor my body. Then I'm something even above that.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you, Dia and Ritu. So again, maybe we should write this down for us and put it somewhere where we can see, especially the last part. That would be very helpful.
I can take a picture and send it.
Yeah, you do that. And even this we can, right? Like just because we keep falling, I'm not my impulses, I'm a conscious soul, you know? This also we can, that's another way of saying it. So I don't want to start a new paragraph, passage, but since neither of you were there last time on the same lines, We had covered a small but very beautiful passage by Sri Aurobindo. Maybe we can just take a recap because we still have a few minutes left. So, Dia, would you like to read this passage for us?
Yeah, sure. The difficulties of character persist so long as one yields them in action when they rise. One has to make a strict rule not to act according to the impulses of anger, ego, or whatever the weaknesses may be that one wants to get rid of. Or if one does act in the heat of the moment, not to justify or persist in the action. If one does that, after a time of after a time, the difficulty abates or it is confined purely to a subjective movement which one can observe, detach oneself from, and combat. Shri Aurobindo.
Yeah, thank you. Again, it's like in very short, he said what Mother has elaborated on, that we all have difficulties, right, in our character, in our nature. So those difficulties which I feel I am a slave to, and if I don't feel, I must realize I am a slave to them, they persist so long as one yields to them in action when they rise. So it's like, they come and we're like, जो हुकुम मेरे आका, लड़ना है हाँ लड़ेंगे, गिरना है हाँ गिरेंगे, accuse करना है हाँ करेंगे. So we yield, we say, you are my boss, I am your slave, you win, I lose. So these difficulties persist so long as one yields to them in action when they arise. One has to make a strict rule. So in this thing, we cannot go easy on ourselves. If we go easy on ourselves, we will never get over those characters, the difficulties in the character. One has to make a strict rule not to act according to the impulses of anger, ego, or whatever the weakness may be. Everybody, uses the word anger first when it comes to impulses because that is one impulse that takes like forever to leave and it really makes us dance on its tunes. So the impulses of anger, ego, or whatever the weakness may be that one wants to get rid of, or if one does act in the heat of the moment, not to justify. So one thing is not to act, that to make a strict rule, and still if you have acted, it's okay. But don't justify your action, don't persist in the action. It has happened to me a few times that I've been like fighting, verbally fighting, and suddenly something happens, something switches inside, and I start laughing. It hasn't happened often, but it does happen. So then, if it's happening, am I allowing the lightness to come in? If I'm allowing the stupidity to realize the stupidity and laugh, or am I continuing with the action and justifying I did this because this is what gives it strength. So if say there's a child, your child, he's a bully. You tell him, you tell him, you tell him, he doesn't listen. He's finding too much joy, too much rasa in bullying. But if you don't justify his actions, if somebody comes and you're like, yes, you should also blame him, I blame him too. If there's something that would, if they want to, I don't know, punish him or give him something or take him to the principal or feel they need to be suspended, if you don't stand on the way, thinking that what would happen to the future and stuff, you would actually help the child get rid of that thing. Because if you are shielding it, of course the child will say, मैं कुछ भी करूं, right? So the same thing when I allow, first of all, I do something which I know is not good. Then I justify it. I give excuses that this is the reason why I did it. So then that would not work in my favor. I would not be able to give that, get over, transcend that difficulty in my character. So even if I was not able to control, Let me not at least justify that, both outside and inside. And of course, not persist in the action. Stop as soon as I see where I'm falling. If one does that, after a time, the difficulty abates, it goes away, it leaves us, or is confined purely to a subjective movement. So it just happening. It's happening. It's not directed at me. I don't respond, which one can observe, detach oneself from. So then it becomes separate. There is a stepping back that has happened, and now it doesn't have that control. Yes, anger is coming. You can see it's rising. You can observe, detach, and combat is you can fight it, you can win over it. So, very short passage by Sri Aurobindo, Difficulty of the Character. I found it to be very beautiful. So, next session, we'll take up more passages and we'll end the session here. Thank you so much for joining in, for actively participating. Grateful for this company, this Sangha. So, as we end, thanking grace, thanking the divine for such beautiful words of wisdom, these lights that are left for me so that I can refine myself, so that I can progress, remembering that the goal of this birth is not sentimentality, emotions, comforts, physical accomplishments, materialistic gains. Those are just side things. The goal is progress, progress of consciousness, clarity, simplicity. And may I be able to give it the attention in my life that it truly deserves, to purify myself and be one drop of poison less, because each drop counts. Praying and aspiring for purity and faith and humility and surrender for ourselves and for every sentient being. Sharing the merit, if any, from all my actions, my thoughts, all my doings with everyone. Thank you so much.
You.